All right, Halloween is now just a couple of days away. I guess it's Sunday here at the Daily Wire. Everybody's dressed up in a costume, various costumes. Somebody asked me outside why I wasn't wearing a costume, and I said I have a philosophical objection to wearing costumes. And he said, "What's your philosophical objection?" I said, "My philosophical objection is that I am a grown-ass man. I do not wear costumes." However, many of you will be out. If you're doing it to get candy, that makes sense to me. That I understand that, but otherwise, no, I won't do it. But it is still, I still would like to end this series I've been doing about scary stories with some personal reflections about my relationship to scary stories, because I spent a lot of my life writing stories that involved violence, that involved evil, involved murder, and some of them have been supernatural stories. When I was writing for movies, I mean, most of my professional life has been writing novels, but when I was in the movie business for several years, I concentrated on writing ghost stories because The Ring had come out. And I, as you know, as I've talked about, I'm a ghost story aficionado. I've read almost all of the classic ghost stories. I can't think of a classic ghost story I haven't read. But when I saw The Ring, I was living in LA. I was living in Santa Barbara and working in LA. And I went out into the lobby after the movie because I thought the movie was wonderful. And I went out into the lobby after the movie to hear what people were saying about it. And I saw a bunch of young girls, like 13 years old, coming out and saying that was the scariest movie I ever saw. And I suddenly had this brain flash where I realized the movie was rated PG-13, which was very odd for a horror movie. Most ghost stories and scary movies are rated R, or were at that time. And these people had realized that if you cut out some of the gore and you get a little more subtle, you can get a PG-13 rating and bring in young people who've never seen this kind of story before. And I thought, oh gosh, that's just the kind of story I love. I love ghost stories. I like doing them without gore. And that gave me several years of a very successful Hollywood career. So I've spent a lot of my time writing these kinds of stories, and I've thought a lot about the morality of writing stories like this, whether it's right to write horror stories, whether it's right to write stories where there's a lot of violence and where the violence is realistic, and how realistic can violence get before it becomes exploitative. And when I started out in my youth, I basically had the idea that all good art is inherently moral because it speaks the truth about the internal life of human beings, and that is a moral thing. And I still feel pretty much that that's true, but I can't help but noticing that my own personal tolerance for certain forms of art has gotten smaller. I do not want to see kinds of art that are going to upset me in very specific ways. 3 or 4 years ago, they took The Exorcist and they made it into a television show. Now, I saw the original Exorcist, absolutely true story. I saw the original movie, The Exorcist, 1973. So I'm 19 years old. I'm working at a news station, at a radio news station. I dropped out of college and I was working at a radio news station. And The Exorcist was a smash. I mean, it's just hard to even think about how big it was in the country. It was huge. And so one day, a friend of mine who was a DJ at the radio station where I was a newsman came in and said, "I'm interviewing a real live exorcist to promote the movie, and we were going to go out afterwards, the exorcist and his girlfriend and me. We're going to go see the movie. Do you want to come?" I said, sure, I'll come. So we get in the car, and this exorcist, the guy says he's an exorcist, and I just thought he was a complete and utter phony. I mean, I just thought from the minute he started talking, he was a complete, utter phony. And I had no beliefs. I had no religious beliefs whatsoever. I was a complete skeptic, an atheist, I would say, probably, but a total skeptic. And I was just starting making the usual jokes that you know that I like to make. And he was getting more and more angry at me. He was furious. So we go into the movie and we start watching the movie. And, you know, the movie is this little girl who's being taken over by a demon. And the DJ was sitting next to me, and he was a nice guy, and he had a Catholic background. And he's sitting next to me, and I'm watching this thing, and I think, this stinks. I hate this movie. I hated the film. I've never liked it. I've never liked it. Didn't enjoy watching the girl get all torn apart. Didn't find it scary at all. Just found it kind of gory and disgusting. Toward the end, as it's reaching its climax, I look over, and the DJ is bent double, and I thought he was laughing. And I leaned over to say, yeah, this is a pretty dumb movie. And he grabbed me by the front of the shirt. Absolutely true story. Grabs me by the front of the shirt, says, "I'm hyperventilating." So he was hyperventilating. He was so terrified by the movie. So I picked him up in my arms, and I'm carrying up the aisle out to the lobby. And it was one of these big, San Francisco movie theaters. It was a very beautiful, old-fashioned movie theater with a huge lobby. And I come out in the lobby, and it looks like Gettysburg. It looks like a battle scene. All over the floor, women are sobbing. Men are prostrate, just lying there, looking up at the ceiling. I mean, seriously, the whole place was just covered with people who were in shock at the horror and fear that they were experiencing. And this little theater manager is walking around with smelling salts and putting them under people's nose. So people are just lying there looking like, oh my God, I'm saying, and he just cracks this thing and they kind of sit up with the smelling salts, and it was all over the place. And I sat my friend down and I said, just take easy breaths, just stay calm, everything's fine. And the exorcist comes out of the movie theater and he says, step aside, he's been possessed by a demon, I'll expel it. I just said, as I remembered, I put my hands on the guy and just thrust him back toward the theater. And he said, I guess I'll go watch the end of the movie, because I was ready to deck him. I was really furious. So the movie had a very powerful effect, but not on me. Partly because I didn't believe in anything, I didn't believe in demons, but partly because I didn't have a Catholic background, I didn't immediately react to it. However, I did sample this movie many, many years later, this TV show of The Exorcist, and I found it really good. I found it really well written. I found it extremely scary, and I found it subtle. It was not like the movie. It was not full of gore. It was subtle. Here's just a little bit of the trailer. Where the mother comes in to tell the priest that something terrible is happening in her house.
My daughter, Catherine, she's back from college. She's different.
Cat?
The way she talks, the way she looks at me. It's not depression. I know depression. There are things going on in the house. In my house, there are voices inside the walls. I am not a crazy person.
I'm not saying you're crazy.
There is something inside my house. It's a demon.
A demon?
And it's trying to take my daughter. Oh God! Oh my God!
So it was very spooky, and there was a portrait of the demon in it, who was played at one point. You kind of saw the demon who was trying to take over her daughter, which was really good. He was just a shabby, kind of evil person who seemed to be sympathetic, but you could just reeked evil. And it was really frightening. It was genuinely frightening. And I stopped watching it. And that would have been something I would never have done. If I thought something was well done and I thought it was frightening, I just thought, I do not want this evil in my head. I do not want it in my head. I know there's evil. I don't have to school myself in this. I don't need art to teach me this. I just don't want it in my head. I stopped watching it, and it went off the air. I'm not sure why it went off the air, because I thought it was really quite good. But I didn't want it in my head anymore. And I compare that, said this before, but I compare it to A Quiet Place, which is a horror movie and it's a monster movie. It's got blood scenes, got tragedy in it and all that. But I found it, and the suspense of that film had me twisted in a knot as I sat watching it, but I found it uplifting because of the love of the family, and because the central scene in that movie is a woman giving birth with this monster hunting her. And so you don't just have the evil of the monster, the danger of the monster, the rapaciousness of the monster. You have this central act of creation going on that is what your heart is attached to. This is not about message. Well, this is something I really have a problem with. People think, well, the message is good, so the film must be good. The message is good, so it must be all right that there's a lot of violence in it. And that, I don't believe that at all. The other day I'm in my new house and I'm setting up my new TV, and I had to press a button to put something on so I could see if it was working. And what came on was a film that I'd never seen before called, with the lovely title, I Spit on Your Grave. It's a musical comedy. No, obviously it's a horror film. I Spit on Your Grave, it's called, and it's about a woman who gets raped and then has her revenge. And you can say, well, it's about the empowerment of this movie. But the first part of it is just this endless rape of this woman, which I eventually just said, I'm not watching this anymore, because the titillation is about the rape. What you're really watching it for is about the rape. That's what they're showing you. I've told the story before, how a job that I lost in Hollywood when I was writing ghost stories, they would call me in, and everything in Hollywood is like a drain. Everything gets worse and worse because they go after the lowest common denominator. So what started as writing ghost stories became writing horror stories, and then became this day when I was brought in, and they said, we want you to write a movie that's about a woman who gets kidnapped and tortured. And I went, yeah. No, that's it. That's the story. I said, that's the story. He said, yeah. And I said, well, my problem is if a woman is running away and a man with a butcher knife is chasing her, I'm rooting for the woman. And they said, yeah, we don't want that. That's not what we want. And I was gone. It's not about the message. It's about what I would call emotional valence. Valence is a chemistry word. It means, it describes the different ways atoms attach to one another. And emotional valence is defined, I took it out of the dictionary, the capacity of one person or thing to react with or affect another in some special way, as by attraction or the facilitation of a function or activity. It's the way it attaches to you. So in this film, I Spit on Your Grave, it's the rape, it's the sexuality, the kind of sick, sadistic sexuality of the rape that attaches to you. And the vengeance is really kind of not what you're there to see, whereas in the A Quiet Place, it's this woman and this family and the love of the family that has all the emotional attachment. And the monsters don't even matter. The monsters are just objects, and you have to watch this because I talked earlier about the way that when I was a kid, you would build monster models. And you think about that for a minute, and it was really a sign of being slightly disturbed, which I was as a child. That why are you building Dracula, not building a Van Helsing, model? Why are you building models? Why is Jason from Friday the 13th or Michael Myers for Halloween? Why is he the character that you remember? Because he has the emotional valence. And that's the thing that I've stopped being attracted to. That is this thing that I cannot watch anymore. More and more I feel, what I think art is I think art is practice for life. It is rehearsal for life. It is a way of teaching yourself how to act in life because it takes you to places you can't go. It communicates, it links your soul to the artist's soul, your inner life to the artist's inner life. So you know more people than you would ever meet in your life, and you've experienced more things than you could ever experience in a single life. And it teaches you how to react. And so I'm willing to react with ugliness if it's the ugliness and violence of Medea, a story about a woman who kills her children, or the ugliness of King Lear or Macbeth, in which children are also killed and violent things happen. And yet you're getting such a deep insight into the human condition that really the emotional valence is with life itself. And that really deepens your life, and it deepens the way you feel about things. And art, I think, is practice for life. And so I want the art that I consume now to give me practice for living life to the full. About 10 years ago, I noticed I had a very, very weird habit. I don't have a lot of weird habits, actually, but I noticed that when I was sitting up late at night and I was channel surfing, I would think to myself, I think I want to watch a horror movie. I wonder if there's a horror movie. And the minute I found one, I turned it off. I would say, I don't want to watch that. Why do I don't want to watch it? It's gory, it's bloody, it's ugly. I don't want to watch it. And I thought, this is a repetitive action that must come from some kind of childhood trauma. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was that thing I was talking about last week about Horror Hotel, that movie scaring me so badly that I felt compelled to repeat the trauma. I didn't explore what it was. I just stopped doing it. I broke the habit because I want to be free of the past. I talked about your imagination in relationship with your body. And if your imagination is subsumed by your body, if it is dominated by your body, it will get stuck in the past. It'll get stuck on this path. And that's why pornography gets you stuck on more and more fetishes and more violence, because it sticks you in the past, because your past is written on your body. But your imagination goes into the future. And I think that is what you're trying to do. That's why I think the ultimate work of art is the Christian Mass, where your imagination is taught to turn matter, simple matter, bread and wine, into the body and blood of the living God, the Word of God. That is the ultimate work of art. And I think it's what all art should be teaching us to do. So all I can say to you on Halloween, enjoy the scary shows, enjoy the movies, but keep an eye out for what you let into your imagination, because your imagination is the point, and it's not only where the world's future will be made, it's where your future will be made as well. You like rotten content? No, of course not. You like great content, so subscribe right here.